This is Zumi Cappers. The manga starts with Hinagi telling the honored one, Yukito, that she was dating somebody senpai or an upperclassman. Damn, cooked already? The honored one Yukito mustered all his courage to speak to the love of his life, Suzurikawa Hinagi, determined to confess his love. With a stiff posture, he told her they've known each other since childhood, and she has always been special to him. However, after being dumped, Yukito suddenly clenched his fist and ran away without warning, leaving Hinagi dumbfounded. As he kept running, memories of Hinagi flashed. He always thought their feelings were mutual, and now, after hearing the harsh truth, nothing made sense anymore. With tears on his cheeks, Yukito wished to disappear. Shoyu High School Year 1 Class B. That was the class Yukito was in. It was the first day of school, which meant it was time for introductions, the most crucial day of Yukito's life. A girl named Sakurai Kana was called, introducing herself enthusiastically. As Yukito perceived the girl as the sunny type, he was also deciding on which personality he should showcase for his introduction. Next, a girl named Shakadu Anya sprung from her seat, randomly sharing that she liked bugs. Weird flex, but okay. As Yukito thought this girl was a bit gloomy, he was also contemplating where he should make a low-key or unforgettable debut. Finally, Gojo Yukito had decided he wouldn't take a big risk. He will be the average, harmless, and gloomy character. He will go with the forgettable yet easy-to-go-by persona. That's crazy, just Sibao bro. When it was finally his turn to introduce himself, Yukito wasted no time to deliver his nonchalant speech. Just then, he thanked everyone for taking care of him because now he was going to quit school. Everyone was left with their mouths gaping wide, unable to process what the class weirdo just said. Yukito realized he wasn't as forgettable as he had hoped, and now everyone thought of him as an oddball, instead of being embarrassed. He was rather understanding, accepting the fact that what he did was actually weird. At least this guy is self-aware. The teacher, who called him by his last name, Kokonoi, asked what the hell just happened. Yukito simply shrugged, apologizing for his one-of-a-kind introduction. He claimed that the word was unreasonable, leading him to think that going to school was pointless. Although confused, the teacher was left with no choice but to accept the young man's point of view. Despite the banger intro, Yukito wasn't done. He continued speaking, introducing his full name and his goal of being the gloomy guy who was always alone. On most days, he would pretend to be asleep so he would appreciate it if everyone treated him like he didn't exist. He wouldn't even mind if everyone verbally attacked him, saying things like he was disgusting and undiagnosed with a mental health disorder. Well, that won't even matter because Yukito was convinced that no one would want to talk to a gloomy character like him. Everybody was too stunned to speak, making Yukito think he had done a good job. Definitely no one would talk to him now. However, the teacher, Fujishiro, suddenly exclaimed that he shouldn't waste his high school life like that, as she was more than willing to lend him a hand. Yukito thought the teacher was overly nice and he refused her offer. He also reassured her that his high school life wasn't the only thing he had wasted. Fujishiro was surprised and she was slightly creeped out by the young man's realistic mindset. She then told him to sit down, noting that she was now aware of Yukito being a problem child. The rest of the class burst into laughter, while Yukito argued that he was just being modest. This made Fujishiro laugh harder, leaving Yukito confused. His introduction was totally normal. He tried asking his seatmate for validation, but the latter only replied that whatever that was, the school year would definitely be fun with him around. Yukito's seatmate called him by his first name and handed him his phone, asking to exchange contacts. Yukito, on the other hand, was surprised to be treated so casually. He called his seatmate Tanaka, who then called him out because he had just introduced himself as Mihu Kuki. Yukito apologized for his mistake, reasoning that he wasn't listening. However, a more important matter crossed his mind. Why the heck was this guy even talking to a gloomy person like him? Yukito flashed this question to Mihu, and he replied that he was rather unique than gloomy. Mihu didn't care. He just wanted to become friends with Yukito. However, at the back of Yukito's mind, he believes that Mihu just wanted him to be his errand boy. By placing a gloomy guy like him on Mihu's side, his handsomeness will shine more. But on the bright side, a self-centered guy was easier to deal with than someone who had a poker face. Mihu, noticing that Yukito was internally pissed, noted that he looked like he was cursing him in his mind. Just then, Yukito pulled out some cash from his wallet, asking if a friend's task was to give money. Surprised by his understanding of friendship, Mizu asked him what traumatic experience he had in the past. This guy totally needs to touch grass. Mizu told Yukito to close his wallet and the latter obliged, suddenly becoming docile. Despite being weirded out, Mizu flashed a smile, noting that he would be in Yukito's care from now on. He then asked Yukito if he was free after school.
Just then, Sakura Ikana suggested that they do karaoke since they are all classmates now.
She then asked Yukito if he wanted to come, making him overthink the whole situation. They were finally at the point where they would gather as classmates to get to know each other better. Yukito thought that Sakura Ikana was the sunniest of the sunny characters, which would mean that she was his strongest rival. He knew he'd have to deal with this problem, so he immediately came up with a strategy. With a demure gesture, he claimed that Sakura was a queen, and he insisted on calling her Elizabeth. This left the girl confused as her name was far from what Yukito was suggesting. Just then, Yukito expressed his disbelief at being invited. So Sakura explained that Mizu vouched for him, claiming that he wasn't weird. Hearing this, Yukito gazed at the other students who were going, and he saw a mix of hesitant and excited faces. Just then, he slammed his palms on the desk, apologizing to Sakura for not being able to come. He reasoned that he had something to tend to, leaving Sakura no choice but to respect his wishes. As Yukito made his way to the door, Sakura yelled that she would love for him to come next time. As Yukito left, he thought that he wasn't exactly lying because he really had to go home and make dinner for his mother. On top of that, hanging around with those girls was just a disaster waiting to happen. He thought about Suzurakawa Hinagi and how she was in a relationship. He wouldn't want to be the one to cause any issues. Imagine joining a most delusional contest, and you're up against this guy. Then there's Kamishiro Shiori, the most innocent person Yukito has ever seen. Being with her just seemed off, and it looked like she was uncomfortable whenever he was around. Yukito was sure that those two girls were bothered by his presence. That was why when he saw their names in the name list, he vowed to stay away from them. However, fate had a different plan, and they were ironically put in the same class. Elsewhere, the rest of the class had a blast in the karaoke bar. Their conversation shifted to Yukito, and they wondered what his deal was. One of the guys claimed he was bad news as no one would quit school on their first day. Just then, Mizu joined the conversation saying that Yukito was just an interesting guy. When asked about his relationship with Yukito, Mizu explained that they used to play basketball in middle school, but they were on opposite teams and doubted that he still remembered. Curious, Kamishiro Shiori asked if Mizu ever had a match with Yukito back in middle school, and he confirmed it. Mizu was surprised that Kamishiro knew about this, so he asked if she knew why he didn't show up at the tournament. Just then, Kamishiro abruptly shifted her gaze, saying that she couldn't talk about it. Overhearing the gossip, one of the girls asked if she was good friends with Yukito, but she said it was the opposite. She was certain that Yukito hated her. Back in the summer of their second year, Kamishiro had a major interest in Yukito. Their club wasn't that committed to their activities, so the girls and boys took it upon themselves to have fun. Kamishiro joined in, but Yukito caught her eye. It was like he was possessed, and he kept shooting the ball with utmost determination. It was as if he was trying to prove or forget something. Yukito's efforts summoned the passion and commitment the club never had, and with him, they could have aimed for a high spot at the tournament. Because of that, the club got fired up. Back then, Kamishiro thought of him as the greatest person ever. He was able to change and influence people by just being himself. However, he never took care of himself, so she took the role. Soon enough, she noticed that she was falling for him. But she was just a kid back then, and she couldn't be honest with her feelings. Because of that, she confessed to him despite being unsure. Being immature, she ended up betraying him in the most hideous way. Bro, this girl needs a trip to the psych ward. Looking back at it now, Kamishiro was sure that she caused Yukito's oddness. Suddenly, Kamishiro unexpectedly gazed into Hinagi's eyes, causing her to get defensive. Hinagi stood from her seat, angrily saying that she was hearing things. She asked Kamishiro to repeat her story, but the latter wasn't buying it. She interrogated Hinagi for her hostile reaction, demanding to know what was up between her and Yukito. Two of the girls in the group were quick to pick up on the tense atmosphere. The place was suddenly turning into an arena, which didn't make sense because Kamishiro and Hinagi were supposed to be friends because they came from the same middle school. Just then, Hinagi shared that she was Kamashiro's childhood friend. Kamashiro furiously asked if she caused Yukito to change, and Hinagi regrettably admitted it. However, she suddenly got enraged, asking Kamashiro to disclose what she actually did to Yukito. As the situation escalated, Sakurai stepped in, pulling the girls apart before they decided to tear each other's faces. She reminded the girls that they were in a get-together, so they should be getting along. The others, feeling trapped in the moment, just tried smiling to their awkwardness. Just then, Hinagi took her bag and headed to the door, claiming that she was leaving. Meanwhile, Kamashiro apologized for ruining the moment, and she excused herself to go home. After the two left, the rest of the group was finally able to breathe. To feel better, they urged the guy named Kazunari to start singing, and he immediately got into action. Mizu, on the other hand, was still baffled by Yukito's backstory. That night, Yukito was on the hot seat for his unhinged introduction. His sister Yuri was furious because of what he did. He couldn't even go ahead and eat dinner because Yuri was busy interrogating him. This led Yukito to believe that someone was spying on him because word of his outrageous introduction reached her ears. As Yukito took a bite of his dry food, Yuri suddenly asked if he purposely embarrassed himself to avoid Hinagi and Kamashiro. However, Yukito sighed, merely saying that he had no comments. Yuri suddenly gave him a death stare, causing Yukito to admit the truth. He knew his sister heard about Hinagi, his childhood friend, but it turned out that she also knew Kamashiro. Suddenly, Yukito stood from his seat, claiming that he had to go study. Sensing he was upset, Yuki asked if he was okay. Yukito said he was fine and then went straight to his room. As he plopped on his bed, he felt bad for being rude to his sister. Could it be that she actually cared about him? That would be impossible because Yuri hated his guts. Meanwhile, Yuri slammed her fist on the table, angrily asking why Yukito was always the one suffering. She wanted her brother to have a bright high school life, but nothing changed at all. Both Suzurikawa Hinagi and Kamishiro Shiori were useless little rats in her eyes, and for that she will never forgive them. Based on the look on her brother's face, Yuki was sure that Yukito still hated her. He would never speak to her unless it was for practical reasons, and she knew this wasn't a normal sibling dynamic, but she couldn't blame him because she caused it in the first place. Ever since that fateful day, he never called her his sister ever again. Yuki slowly wrapped her arms around herself for comfort, accepting the fact that Yukito would always hate her. Even so, she will protect him from Kamishiro and Hinagi. The next day at school, Kamishiro and Hinagi tried catching Yukito's attention. Kamishiro asked if he was joining the basketball club, and then she mentioned that he was planning to become the club's manager. Hinagi, on the other hand, asked Yukito if he wanted to have lunch with her in the cafeteria. Yukito was more confused than ever, making him ask God why he kept sending him trials. Yukito had always been unlucky with women. His own mother neglected him, his sister hated him. His childhood friends who he assumed liked him had a boyfriend right before his confession, and he got bullied during his heartbreak phase. All his troubles stacked up, and the most obvious one was his relationship with women. With all his dilemma, Yukito theorized that he must have been a reincarnator from another world who got killed after defying evil. After that, he was born into this world with bad karma. Maybe that was why he couldn't build deep bonds with people, and he couldn't even show empathy towards them. It was all too overwhelming, so he gave up on even trying to understand why. But right now, it seemed like the whole world had turned upside down. Why the heck were Hinagi and Kamishiro fighting over him? Kamishiro asked Hinagi if she could talk to Yukito later, as she was the first to speak to him. However, Hinagi stood her ground, suggesting that she spoke with Yukito after they had lunch. As the girls bickered, Yukito was caught in a crisis because he didn't even want to talk to either of them. He only wanted to be left alone, and he could only wish these girls would fight somewhere else. Just then, Mizu asked Yukito which club he planned to join. The girls suddenly fell silent while Yukito flashed a frustrated look at Mizu, pointing out how his question just made the situation worse. Kamishiro suddenly appeared before Yukito, urging him to join the basketball team. She will be the manager, and this time she will commit to the role. Thinking about basketball brought back a lot of bad memories for Yukito. He gave his all, but what he got in return was disappointment. He didn't even reach his goals, and he got nothing out of it. Because of this, he bluntly told Kamishiro that he no longer played basketball. However, Kamishiro remained relentless, refusing to accept his answer. Afraid that Yukito's mind was made up, she slammed her hands on his desk, reminding him that he tried so hard. Just then, Yukito told her she knew what happened best after he poured all his effort. This comment made Kamishiro cry, and she mustered all her courage to say a cohesive response. Yukito coldly asked her how long she was going to pity him, making her feel worse. As Kamishiro panicked, Yukito suddenly concluded the pity party, casually declaring that he didn't have plans to join the club anyway. He was a gloomy guy, and his only club option was to go home. Disappointed, Mizu urged Yukito to reconsider, but his mind was made up. Just then, Yukito headed to the door, informing everyone that he was going to the cafeteria. Kamishiro called him, but Yukito didn't give her time to explain and only wished her luck in being the manager. Kamishiro noticed the coldness in his voice as he no longer called her name like he used to. "Girl, do you still expect to be called Sugar Pie Honey Bunch?" As Yukito headed for the cafeteria, he noticed that the baseball club was still having afternoon practices. He used to practice like crazy back then, but now he felt nothing when he touched the ball. He just lost the energy for it, and he believed he would never play like he used to. However, there was no point in dwelling on the past, so he pulled himself together and continued walking. When he returned to the classroom, Hinagi suddenly approached him asking if he wanted to eat with her. She was down for a hunger strike if it meant eating with this nerd. Yukito was dumbfounded, and he couldn't believe that she was waiting for him to come back. Just then, he burst Hinagi's bubble, bluntly telling her that she should stop talking to him. Hinagi stuttered, reminding him that they were classmates and childhood friends. However, this didn't count to Yukito, and he claimed it was all in the past. When Hinagi asked him why he would say this, Yukito coldly replied that he would feel bad for her boyfriend. Yukito's words hit Hinagi like a bolt of lightning, drawing the attention of everyone around them. Her middle school boyfriend was well known, and exposing that part of her past in front of their classmates was like tearing open an old wound. Hinagi was on the verge of tears, and she asked Yukito to just forget about the past. However, Yukito replied that he was only being mindful, as he wouldn't want his girlfriend to be chummy with another girl. They were childhood friends, so tension was to be expected. Hinagi tried explaining, but Yukito reminded her that he had to distance himself when she had a boyfriend. He didn't understand why Hinagi struggled to get the idea. Yes, they were childhood friends, but this didn't mean they could be together forever. Just then, Yukito decided to leave, coldly telling Hinagi to have lunch with someone else. As he walked away, he was reminded of how he let her go because he wished her the best. Now, he was left wondering if he still felt the same way about her. As soon as Yukito walked out, murmurs filled the classroom. Some students groaned in disappointment, lamenting their lost chances with Hinagi, while others shrugged. After all, someone as stunning as her was bound to be taken. When one of them curiously asked who the lucky guy was, another eagerly leaned in, ready to spill the secret. But before the words could leave their lips, Hinagi snapped. Her voice cut through the chatter like a blade, demanding everyone to shut up. Silence fell as she trembled, her expression crumbling. Then, without warning, tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice broke as she choked out that everything was her fault. Later that day, the teacher announced that the class would be having an outdoor lesson the next day, an annual event designed to strengthen friendships through a hiking trip. As soon as the teacher instructed them to form groups of 4, the room buzzed with excitement. Yukito, however, let out an exhausted sigh, already predicting the outcome. As expected, everyone quickly paired off, leaving him untouched like an unwanted dirty sock. The teacher, now practically begging someone to take him in, scanned the room for volunteers. Most people would have been mortified by the rejection, but Yukito only leaned back in satisfaction. If anything, this was proof that his brooding lone wolf persona was finally taking effect. However, before Yukito could fully revel in his success, Mizu suddenly appeared before him, flashing a charming smile that could make panties drop. Without hesitation, Mizu declared that he wanted to team up with Yukito, leaving the latter momentarily dazed by the sheer power of Mizu's lethal face card. Yukito quickly snapped out of it and attempted to push Mizu away, casually insisting that someone as bright and cheerful as him shouldn't be grouping up with equally sunny people. Mizu, of course, wasn't having it, and the two soon found themselves in a back-and-forth argument. Unbeknownst to them, 2 figures loomed behind them, listening intently. Hinagi and Kamishiro, seemingly unfazed by the ongoing bickering, had already made up their minds. They were forcing their way into this group whether Yukito liked it or not. The following day, the class arrived at their destination. As soon as they got off the bus, Yukito strayed away from the group, leaving Mizu confused. Just then, he called, out to the mountains, saying, "Tartarus." Everybody was weirded out by Yukito's randomness, while Mizu commented that he could never top his friend's humor. Suddenly, Hinagi and Kamishiro appeared, forcing Yukito to keep his distance. Later on, the hike began, and Yukito made sure that he never interacted with the girls. Mizu tried to ease the awkwardness by speaking to him, but Yukito barely replied. Yukito suddenly gazed at the girls, wondering why they paired up with him when they could have just teamed up with their friends. He started to worry, thinking that he would ruin their high school lives. Just then, Hinagi accidentally sprained her ankle, forcing everyone to take a break. Yukito approached her, ambiguously telling her to take them off. Everyone was shocked by his command, especially Hinagi, who refused to do it in public. She held onto her jacket, bashfully telling Yukito that they should do the intimate act when they were all alone. Confused, Yukito asked her what she was yapping about, as he only wanted to see her injured feet. Hinagi quickly showed him her foot, and it was all swollen. Yukito apologized for their fast pacing, but Hinagi argued that it wasn't his fault. She then apologized for slowing them down, but Kamishiro reassured her not to worry about it. Suddenly, Hinagi flinched, obviously worried about something. Before Yukito could say anything, she defensively said that her feet didn't smell. Yukito said she would be offended if he told her that, which made Hinagi more paranoid. Trying to make her more comfortable, Yukito suggested pinching his nose so he didn't have to smell anything. But this only made the situation worse. Bro totally lacked social awareness. Yukito had had enough of Hinagi's drama, so he insisted on smelling her foot to prove that it didn't stink. Hinagi squirmed, but Yukito was a determined sniffer. Of course, they had to draw this panel. As Hinagi kept screaming, Yukito accepted his fate. Everyone will accuse him as the guy with a foot fetish, so he would just turn himself in. Shortly after, Yukito bandaged Hinagi's feet. She tried standing while Yukito asked her if they were too tight. When she confirmed that it was just right, Yukito handed her a bottle of water, reassuring her that they would now go at a slower pace. However, before they could resume their hike, their teacher suddenly clutched onto Yukito's arm, asking him to bandage her feet too. Seeing the exhaustion on her face, Yukito could only say that she looked like a brain-dead zombie. Sensing that she got tired easily, Yukito told her that she will definitely get into trouble on one of her kids' sports festival. The teacher was offended as she wasn't even married yet. Just then, Yukito called Kamishiro, telling her to help the teacher while he instructed her. He reminded her about her plans to be the manager of the basketball team, so this would surely be a helpful skill. Kamishiro quickly jumped into action, following Yukito's instructions. Soon after, the task was done, and Kamishiro proudly asked Yukito for praise. However, Yukito was weirded out, as she looked like a dog begging for a stroll. Oddly enough, he tossed a piece of candy into the distance, and Kamishiro immediately ran off to fetch it. Yukito didn't expect her to listen, but she came back with the candy in hand, asking for a little pat on the head. Riz so good he became Dr. Dolittle. Frustrated, Yukito reminded Kamishiro that she was not a dog, but a human. She furiously replied that he told her to follow his command, and she only complied. Having enough of this nonsense, Yukito exclaimed that if she were to act like a dog, then he would act like a breeder in response. A what now? Suddenly, Yukito patted Kamishiro, much to her delight. However, he started rubbing her belly like an actual dog, making Kamishiro ticklish and uncomfortable. She tried to fight her way out of his clutches, bashfully telling Yukito, just the head. When he didn't listen, Kamishiro screamed that this wasn't what she expected, all while looking like she had just reached the pinnacle of pleasure. At this point, I'm out of commentaries. With Kamishiro lying motionless on the ground, Yukito asked her if she now remembered that she was human. Kamishiro slowly said she was, but then she rolled over to face him, reminding him not to do this to anyone else because he would get into trouble for forcing intimacy. Yukito was confused as he had already committed a violation by doing it to her. He wondered if it was better to remain oblivious, but Kamishiro told him it was bad either way. Suddenly, Kamishiro realized how funny the situation was, and she burst into laughter. She noticed how it started to feel like last year when they were still close. Just then, she touched Yukito's arm, asking him if it felt okay now. He replied that it was, and that she didn't have to worry about it. However, Kamishiro never got over her guilt, and she worriedly admitted that she couldn't do what he asked. Upon seeing her face, Yukito felt guilty as well, realizing that Kamishiro would forgive him for anything he did to make up for her faults. Just then, Mizu called out to them, informing them that it was time to go. As Yukito walked away, he thought about the situation between him and Kamishiro. It seemed like they were frozen in time, unable to go forward. Later on, the group arrived at their final destination in the middle of the woods. The girls were amazed by the view, while Yukito contemplated if he truly was impressed. Mizu, on the other hand, only cared about eating. When it was finally time for lunch, Yukito grabbed his waterproof sheet and the group thanked him for being the resident doraemon. After eating, Yukito asked Hinagi if her feet were okay, and she confirmed they were. She didn't expect to feel better right away, and she was just amazed by the bandage's effectiveness. Just then, Yukito offered her some candies and bandages, making Hinagi wonder why he was so prepared for injuries. She then remembered what had happened to him in middle school, and it all made sense. Yukito was shocked that she knew about this, so Hinagi revealed to him that she was always watching him. Okay, creep. While Yukito wondered why she did this, Hinagi asked why he helped her, to which he simply replied that they were classmates. Hinagi seemed disappointed with his response, but she tried keeping a calm exterior. Suddenly, Yukito noticed the bear keychain attached to her phone, and he was surprised that she still had it. Dazed by what he just said, Hinagi's eyes sparkled as she realized Yukito still remembered. He replied that it was from the festival, and Hinagi confirmed it. She then held the little bear close to her chest, saying that she had fun back then. Suddenly, Yukito started talking about Hinagi's relationship, asking if she had a fight with her boyfriend. She tried answering his question, but she couldn't continue. She then asked him what to do if he hurt someone else's feelings, and Yukito quickly replied that he would apologize. However, Hinagi shook her head, arguing that she would never be forgiven. Hearing this, Yukito suggested they could just start over, which confused Hinagi. Yukito elaborated, saying that if she could still fix it, she should try starting anew with her boyfriend. Hinagi had a moment of enlightenment, and she thanked him as she stood up. Suddenly, she faced Yukito with her head bowed, asking him for forgiveness for all the mean things she had said to him. She bowed even more, admitting she was afraid that they wouldn't be able to go back to what they once were. She was beyond terrified that they wouldn't be together anymore. She also admitted that asking for forgiveness was easy, as she couldn't just tell Yukito to forget about everything. Yukito tried easing his way into the conversation, but Hinagi kept talking, admitting that she was unreasonable, arrogant, and selfish. However, it didn't change the fact that she was sorry. Her voice echoed throughout the crowd, making everyone gaze towards them. Just then, Yukito said that he didn't remember her saying anything mean, which shocked Hinagi. Sensing her confusion, Yukito explained that he should be sorry for exposing her boyfriend. He was more than thankful that she wanted to make amends. He then added that he only needed to get the pain out of his system, which explained his actions. Hinagi frantically asked why he was apologizing, as she was clearly in the wrong back then. Yet Yukito remained calm, his expression unreadable, as he acknowledged that everything she had said back then was true, even if it had been harsh. He had come to understand his place in her life. With a gentle smile, he reassured her that the distance between them wasn't about his feelings being unreturned, but simply the result of choosing different paths. He knew Hinagi had a kind heart, which was why it pained him to see her crying before him. Since when did this dude become Gandhi? Hinagi was important to Yukito, and this was why he could only pray for her happiness from a distance. He knew he had lost his worth as a childhood friend, and they were nothing more than classmates. Later that day, the class boarded the school bus, ready to head home. Just as Hinagi was about to step on, she suddenly froze, rummaging frantically through her bag. Her expression grew tense as she realized something was missing. Kamishiro noticed and asked what was wrong, but Hinagi didn't respond. Instead, her eyes fixated on the string attached to her phone. The small bear keychain was gone. Before she could run off to find it, Yukito grabbed her wrist, reminding her that the bus was about to leave. She protested, insisting that the keychain was important because he had given it to her. But Yukito remained unmoved, telling her that her boyfriend could easily replace it with as many as she wanted. That was the last straw. Hinagi snapped, her frustration boiling over as she yelled that she had had enough of this. Yukito was taken aback, realizing just how much the keychain meant to her. Despite everything, he couldn't just leave her like this. Moments later, Hinagi sat on the bus, gripping the string that once held the bear. Her mind raced. Was this punishment for trying to mend things with Yukito? If so, it felt cruel. That little charm wasn't just an accessory. It was proof of all the time they had spent together, the last gift he had ever given her. She knew she could ask him for another one, but it wouldn't be the same. Staring out the window, she felt torn. Should she go back and search for it? The thought gnawed at her, but deep down she knew she couldn't, not with her injury holding her back. All she could do was sit there, trembling as the bus pulled away. Later at school, the teacher asked some of the students where Yukito was. One of them replied that he felt unwell and went home, making the teacher skeptical because the young man didn't inform her beforehand. The teacher asked Mizu if this were true, but he merely said he didn't know. Hearing the whole class fuss about Yukito, Hinagi could only feel worried. Unbeknownst to everyone, Yukito went back to the forest, declaring that he was back. He sighed, knowing he couldn't ignore Hinagi's whiny face. As he started his search, he promised himself that he would only go on one round, and after that, he'd give up. Hinagi laid on her bed, staring at her phone with a heavy heart, murmuring to herself that there was no way to restore what she had with Yukito. Their families used to attend festivals together, but over time, it had just been the two of them. She remembered one particular night when Yukito had reached for her hand, but she had instinctively pulled away, embarrassed by how sweaty her palm was. She had tried to discreetly wipe it dry, hoping he wouldn't notice, but he never tried to hold her hand again. Well, there goes her chances. Now she couldn't help but wonder if she had just let him hold her hand that day. Would things have turned out differently? Would they have continued spending time together? Maybe even holding hands without hesitation? Would they have kissed, walked home together, and become something more? But now all she could do was wonder. She couldn't really ask him why, because she was to blame for everything. She destroyed their bond. Yukito finally tracked down the bear, though night had already fallen, and he had nearly given up hope of finding it. Sweaty and covered in dirt, he gave himself credit for the discovery, despite his doubts. Holding the bear in his hands, he wondered how long Hinagi would cherish it. He had already discarded everything she had ever given him, both objects and memories alike. Brushing the thought aside, he decided to head home. But before he could take a step, he suddenly lost his footing and tumbled down the hill. As he plummeted, he accepted that this was the end. In his mind, he silently bid farewell to his mother, his sister, Hinagi, Kamishiro, and even Mizu. What a drama queen. It dawned on him that he had only known a handful of people in his life, yet somehow that felt like enough. And so, embracing his fate, Yukito let out a scream as he fell. Back during the festival, Hinagi eagerly dragged Yukito along to get some plum candy with her. He knew that apple candy was her favorite, but she claimed she didn't want to open her mouth too much. So they settled for plum candy, enjoying the moment like carefree kids. After that, Hinagi insisted he play a shooting game to win her a bear keychain. To him, the bear looked ugly, but he tried to win it for her anyway, simply because she seemed happy. By middle school, Hinagi had become even more frustrating. Yet Yukito still held on to the hope that they would return to the festival together the following summer. Seeing her smile as she clutched the bear, he was convinced that their bond would only grow stronger. Just as Hinagi was about to tell Yukito something, a burst of fireworks lit up the sky, drowning out her words. She had just started talking about plans for the next year, when a group of overly excited boys accidentally bumped into her mid-sentence. Reacting quickly, Yukito grabbed her hand to keep her from falling, but to his shock, she immediately swatted it away. She hastily wiped her sweaty palms, but the damage was done. Yukito was already fixated on the rejection, realizing at that moment that things between them would never be the same. That slap wasn't just a reflex, it was a rejection. The next morning, Yukito woke up in bed, his body aching from a cold. At some point, he had managed to make it home, only to collapse in the rain. As he glanced at the clock, he realized he had been asleep for over half a day. He vaguely recalled having a nostalgic dream, though he couldn't remember what it was like to wake up in the middle of the... It was as if he had just woken up from a dream, but he couldn't remember what it was like. Subscribe for the next part.